Graphing tangent equations, Unit 10, Day 3. Let's first look at our parent function, y equals the tangent of x. When plotting a tangent graph, we will draw two vertical asymptotes and place 3 points. In the standard tangent graph, the period will be pi. That means every pi, tangent repeats itself. The vertical asymptotes will be negative pi over 2 and pi over 2. So plotting that, I'm going to label every 2 lines as pi over 2 and draw in my vertical asymptotes at negative pi over 2 and pi over 2. And remember, don't panic. I'm just showing you what the parent function looks like. Well, we're going to have our starting dot at 0, 0. We go 1 step to the left and 1 step to the right, and go our amplitude up to the right, our amplitude down to the left, and we connect them as almost a cubic. So when I'm graphing a tangent, I'm thinking I'm going to get that cubic curve. Remember, we can go forever if we want to. So I graphed one tangent curve here, but I can go again and again and again forever. You can graph as many tangents on one paper as you would like. To transform our parent function, to graph the tangent function, we must find the phase shift, the period, and the vertical asymptotes. So, given our standard function y equals a tan of bx plus c plus d, the phase shift will be to take the parentheses and equal them to 0. So in this standard write-up, we would take bx plus c equals 0 and find that our phase shift is negative c over b. Exact same that we did for sine and cosine. Our period will take our pi divided by b, which is just pi over b. And for our vertical asymptotes, we'll take the phase shift and add half the period. So, negative c over b is our phase shift, and we'll add pi over 2b. Well, there are 2 vertical asymptotes, so the second one will be the phase shift minus the period over 2. So x would be negative c over b minus pi over 2b. Other information we're going to collect is the a, how far up or down the next point is from the start. That is, if we take 1 step to the right, how far up or down we will go. And we'll want the vertical shift d, which is how far up or down the start point is placed. So don't panic. All of this will make more sense while we're trying out our first example. Example 1. Y is the tangent of x over 2. So for our phase shift, we'll set the parentheses equal to 0. If x over 2 equals 0, we multiply both sides by 2, and x is 0. For the period, we're going to take our pi divided by b. So pi divided by 1/2 becomes pi times 2, which is 2 pi. And our vertical asymptotes are going to be the phase shift plus the period divided by 2. Well, our phase shift was 0, so 0 plus 2 pi over 2 means that my first vertical asymptote is at pi. My other vertical asymptote will be that same phase shift minus the period divided by 2. So 0 minus 2 pi over 2, which is negative pi. Our a will be 1, and our vertical shift will be 0. So when we graph this, to label the x-axis, we'll take our period divided by 4. So 2 pi divided by 4 simplifies to pi over 2. So every other line I'll label as pi over 2. I'm going to place down my asymptotes at pi and negative pi. And then I'll place my starting point at the phase shift comma vertical shift. In this case, my start point will be 0, 0. Then I'm going to go 1 step. That is my pi over 2, my period over 4 to the right, and a. So I went pi over 2 to the right and up 1. My third point will be period over 4 to the left and negative a. So I'm going to go left pi over 2 and down 1. And I'm going to connect this in that nice cubic shape. And I'm done. Example 2. Y is the negative 3 tangent of 2x. For my phase shift, we'll set the parentheses equal to 0, so 2x is 0 and x is 0 for my phase shift. For my period, I'm going to take the pi and divide it by b. So pi divided by 2 becomes pi times 1/2, which is pi over 2. Then my vertical asymptotes will be that phase shift plus half of my period. So 0 plus pi over 2 times 1/2, because we're dividing it in 2, will be pi over 4. My other vertical asymptote will be my phase shift minus my period divided in half. So it's going to be 0 minus pi over 2 times 1/2, which is negative pi over 4. My a is negative 3, and my vertical shift will be 0. So when I label my x-axis, I'll take my period and divide it by 4. So pi over 2 divided by 4 is pi over 8. So every 2 lines I'll label as pi over 8. And my vertical asymptotes are at positive pi over 4 and negative pi over 4. For my start point, I'll have my phase shift comma vertical shift, which is again 0, 0. And then I'll take my step to the right. So because my x-axis is labeled as pi over 8, my period divided by 4 to the right is pi over 8, and then I'll go a down because it's negative 3. Well, same thing for my third point. I'll go my period divided by 4 to the left, and now negative a. So negative negative 3 is positive 3. So when I go pi over 8 to the left, I'll go up 3. And again, draw my nice cubic-like shape. Example 3. Y is 2 times the tangent of x over 3 plus 1. For my phase shift, we'll set the parentheses equal to 0. If x over 3 equals 0, then x is 0. My period is going to be pi divided by b. So pi divided by 1/3 becomes 3 pi. And my vertical asymptotes are going to still be my phase shift plus the period over 2. So 0 plus 3 pi over 2 is 3 pi over 2. And my phase shift minus the period over 2. So 0 minus 3 pi over 2 is negative 3 pi over 2. My a will be 2, and my vertical shift will be 1. So looking to my graph, to label the x-axis, let's try something a little different. Let's try using pi over 2 as my label. So when I plot my asymptotes, I'm still going to plot them at positive 3 pi over 2 and negative 3 pi over 2. And now my start point will be at phase shift comma vertical shift still. So in this case, that's 0, 1. And my second point will be the period divided by 4 to the right and a up or down. So 3 pi divided by 4 is 3 pi over 4. So I'm going to travel to 3 pi over 4 and go 2 up. If you have any questions, please let me know. Remember, we can talk this out. Well, for my third point, we'll still take that period over 4 to the left and go down 2. So we'll go 3 pi over 4 to the left and down 2 for my starting point. So remember, you can label the x-axis however you want to. Whatever is going to let you get the nicest graph. For example 4, we have y as the tangent of 2x minus pi. For our phase shift, we'll set the parentheses equal to 0, so 2x minus pi is 0, means that 2x is pi, and x will be pi over 2. For our period, pi divided by b means we'll take pi divided by 2, which is pi over 2. And our vertical asymptotes are going to be the phase shift plus the period divided by 2. So we get pi over 2 plus pi over 2 divided in half. So, getting like denominators, I get 2 pi over 4 plus pi over 4, which is 3 pi over 4. Then for my other vertical asymptote, I'm taking that phase shift minus the period divided by 2. So pi over 2 minus pi over 2 times 1/2. That's 2 pi over 4 minus pi over 4, which is 1 pi over 4. Talk to me if you have any questions. My a is still 1, and my vertical shift is 0. So when I plot this, I'll label my x-axis using the period divided by 4. You don't have to do that this way. There are a lot of options. But pi over 2 times 1/4 is pi over 8. So I can label every other line as pi over 8 if I'd like to. And now my vertical asymptotes are at 3 pi over 4 and pi over 4. My start point will be the phase shift comma vertical shift, which is pi over 2 comma 0. Notice that it's exactly in the middle of my asymptotes. That's kind of cool. My second point will be the period divided by 4 to the right, and then a up. So the period divided by 4 is pi over 8, so I'll go pi over 8 to the right and up 1. For my third point, it's period divided by 4 to the left and down a. So I'll go pi over 8 to the left and down 1. I connect it in my nice cubic-like shape. Alright, if you have any questions, please let me know. I look forward to seeing your lovely tangent graphs.